Phoenix Spencer Horn, known to friends as Fee, was 21 years old and the kind of person whose name perfectly matched her spirit. She had a gift for helping others through their darkest moments and always seemed to rise above every challenge life threw at her. Grace McCabe, who became a Miss Scotland 2024 finalist, would never forget Phoenix's kindness. She said, "Phoenix consistently reached out, was my friend, and supported me through the hardest time. I wish she got all of the happiness and success I knew was out there for her." Phoenix was incredibly hardworking, juggling multiple jobs, including waitressing at the Strathaven Hotel and working at local coffee shops. Her colleagues consistently described her as being in good spirits, someone who brought positive energy to even the most demanding shifts. At 21, she was standing at the threshold of what should have been a long and fulfilling life. Living with her in a flat on Glen Lee in East Kilbride was her boyfriend of 2 years, Ewan Methan. The 27-year-old postman for Royal Mail had met Phoenix at a family party, and their relationship seemed to develop naturally. To Phoenix's family, Ewan appeared perfect for their daughter, polite, respectful, and genuinely affectionate. Over 2 years, he had been welcomed into the Spencer family with open arms, essentially becoming an adopted son. They trusted him completely. Phoenix's mother, Allison Spencer, had grown particularly fond of Ewan, exchanging regular text messages with him. When Phoenix mentioned Ewan in conversation, it was clear she felt secure in their relationship, proud of the life they were building together. But beneath the surface, something was starting to crack. As 2024 progressed, subtle changes began to emerge in Ewan's behavior that Phoenix might have initially dismissed as normal relationship adjustments. He had started expressing frustration about her work schedule, particularly her waitressing shifts at the Strathaven Hotel. The complaints began small. Ewan would mention feeling lonely when Phoenix worked evenings or weekends. At first, this might have seemed endearing, a boyfriend who missed his girlfriend when she was away, but the frequency and intensity of these complaints gradually increased. Phoenix, with her naturally caring disposition, would apologize when Ewan expressed these feelings. She understood that relationships required compromise, and she loved Ewan enough to want to address his concerns. But what she didn't recognize was that she was being slowly conditioned to feel guilty for her independence and ambition. The pattern was insidious. Ewan would complain about her work schedule. Phoenix would apologize, and then she would try to adjust her behavior to make him feel better. It was a cycle that many people in controlling relationships recognized too late. The gradual erosion of personal autonomy disguised as love and concern. Phoenix's family, who had embraced Ewan so completely, had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. When they saw the couple together, Ewan continued to present the same polite, considerate facade that had won them over in the first place. Phoenix, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly focused on managing Ewan's emotional needs rather than pursuing her own goals. The irony was devastating. Phoenix, who had built a reputation for lifting others up and supporting them through difficult times, was now trapped in a relationship where her own emotional well-being was being systematically undermined. The woman who had helped Grace McCabe through her hardest time was now navigating her own nightmare, but she couldn't see it clearly yet. Looking back, the warning signs had been there all along, but they were wrapped in the language of love and concern. Ewan's complaints about her work weren't presented as demands. They were framed as vulnerabilities, as his need for her presence and attention. For someone as empathetic as Phoenix, this manipulation was particularly effective. By November 2024, the dynamic in their relationship had shifted dramatically from what it had been in the beginning, though Phoenix was still trying to make it work. Saturday, November 16, 2024, began like countless others before it. Both Phoenix and Ewan went to work that morning, following routines that had become second nature over the months and years they'd been together. Phoenix arrived at the Strathaven Hotel in good spirits. According to her colleagues, she had always been the kind of employee who could make even difficult customers feel welcome. The hotel's guests and her fellow staff members had come to expect her warm smile and genuine helpfulness. Ewan, meanwhile, completed his postal route for Royal Mail. To his co-workers, he appeared no different than usual. When his shift ended, he told a colleague he was heading home to chill, a perfectly ordinary comment that would later take on a chilling significance. But while Phoenix was working her shift, something was brewing in Ewan's mind. During the afternoon, as Phoenix served customers and went about her duties, she received a text message from Ewan that would prove to be a crucial piece of evidence in understanding what happened next. Ewan complained to Phoenix that her waitressing shifts made him feel lonely. It wasn't the first time he had expressed this sentiment, but there was something different about this particular message, an edge that Phoenix might have sensed but didn't fully understand. Phoenix, true to her nature, responded with an apology. She texted back, expressing regret that her work schedule was affecting him and likely trying to reassure him that she would be home soon. It was exactly the kind of response that had become typical in their relationship. Phoenix, taking responsibility for Ewan's emotional state and prioritizing his feelings over her own professional commitments. What Phoenix couldn't know was that this exchange was the final straw for Ewan. Something in his mind had snapped, or perhaps had been building toward this moment for weeks or months. The resentment he had been expressing about her work, the control he had been gradually exerting over her life was about to explode into violence. When Phoenix finished her shift and headed home to their flat on Glen Lee, she had no idea she was walking toward her death. The last text message she would ever send to her mother, Allison Spencer, came. At 9:37 p.m., she told her mother that she and Ewan were at home eating dinner together. Around 8 p.m., Ewan had ordered takeaway food for them. When the delivery driver arrived at their flat, he would later tell police that Ewan appeared completely normal, not drunk, not agitated, not under the influence of any substances. This detail would prove crucial later when Ewan tried to claim that drugs and alcohol had caused him to black out and lose control. The evening must have seemed routine to Phoenix. After a day of work, she was home with her boyfriend, sharing a meal and probably looking forward to relaxing together. She likely had no sense that anything was wrong, no indication that the man she loved and trusted was about to become her killer. But around midnight, neighbors in the flat below theirs heard something that would haunt them forever. The downstairs neighbors had grown accustomed to the normal sounds of life from the flat above. Footsteps, conversation, the ordinary rhythms of a young couple living their lives. But what they heard around midnight on November 16th was different. There was a loud noise followed by what they described as hurried footsteps and increased activity. What they were actually hearing was Phoenix fighting for her life. Ewan had attacked Phoenix with not one, not two, but 3 different knives. The assault was savage and sustained. He stabbed her 20 times with 10 of those wounds concentrated on her face. The fatal wound was a deep stab to her chest that pierced vital organs and ensured she would not survive. But the stabbing wasn't the only violence Phoenix endured in her final moments. Ewan also strangled her, using his hands to compress her neck while she struggled against him. The combination of strangulation and multiple stab wounds painted a picture of an attack that was both frenzied and methodical. Pathologists would later determine that Phoenix may have initially been attacked in the bathroom before being dragged into the hallway, though a bloodied knife was also found in the bedroom. This suggested that the violence had moved through multiple rooms of their home, with Phoenix possibly trying to escape her attacker before being overpowered. The app on Ewan's phone that tracked his physical activity recorded a spike in movement during this time period, corroborating the neighbor's account of increased activity in the flat. This digital evidence would later prove crucial in establishing the timeline of the murder. For Phoenix, who had spent her life helping others and spreading kindness wherever she went, the final moments were filled with unimaginable terror. The man she loved, The man her family had welcomed as a son, the man she had apologized to just hours earlier for working too much, was systematically destroying her. The Phoenix who had reached out to support Grace McCabe during her darkest times, who had brought good spirits to every workplace, who had been looking forward to building a future, was gone. The silence that followed the attack was absolute. But for Ewan Methan, the violence was only the beginning. What he did next would reveal the true depth of his depravity and the calculated nature of his mind. What Ewan Methan did in the hours immediately following Phoenix's murder defied comprehension and revealed a level of callousness that even hardened investigators found difficult to process. After killing Phoenix, Ewan made the decision to decapitate her body. Using the same knives he had used to stab her, he severed her head from her body in what prosecutors described as an attempt to defeat the ends of justice. But the mutilation didn't stop there. Ewan attempted to dismember Phoenix's body further, trying to remove her limbs and torso with knives. The prosecution would later describe how he tried to sever her torso, right wrist, and ankle from her body. When police eventually discovered Phoenix's remains, they found her mutilated and decapitated body hidden under a towel in the hallway of their flat. The scene was so horrific that even seasoned police officers, who had seen the worst of human nature, were deeply disturbed by what they found. 2 blood-stained knives lay beside Phoenix's body, with a third discarded in the bedroom. Blood was spattered throughout multiple rooms of the flat, telling the story of violence that had moved through their shared home. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Ewan's behavior was what he did while Phoenix's mutilated remains lay in their home. At 2:40 a.m., just hours after committing the murder, Ewan was messaging drug dealers attempting to buy cocaine. He would continue these attempts to purchase drugs throughout the weekend. Even more disturbing was how Ewan spent the day after the murder. Forensic analysis of his phone and computer would reveal that on November 17th, from approximately 8 a.m. until 6:30 p.m., Ewan accessed websites 170 times, while Phoenix's decapitated body lay hidden under a towel just meters away. Her killer was spending over 10 hours viewing. The juxtaposition was stomach-turning. A young woman who had been described as beautiful, kind, and full of life, reduced to a concealed corpse, while her murderer satisfied his basest impulses in the same space where he had destroyed her. But Ewan's actions weren't just about drugs and porn. He was also implementing a calculated plan to buy himself time and deflect suspicion. And the cruelest part of this plan involved Phoenix's mother. Allison Spencer had always maintained close contact with her daughter. The regular text messages between mother and daughter were a source of comfort for both women, a way of staying connected despite Phoenix's busy work schedule and independent life. So when Allison tried to reach Phoenix on the morning of November 17th and didn't receive an immediate response, she might not have been immediately concerned. Young people sometimes sleep in on Sundays after all, and Phoenix had mentioned the night before that she and Ewan were having dinner together. But what Allison didn't know was that the responses she began receiving weren't from Phoenix at all. They were from her killer. Using Phoenix's phone, Ewan began an elaborate and heartless deception. When Allison texted to check on her daughter, Ewan responded, claiming that the couple had been drinking and that Phoenix was still sleeping. "Hey, Fee isn't up yet. I'll get her to text you when she is. X," he wrote, perfectly mimicking the casual, loving tone Phoenix would use with her mother. In the UK, adding an X at the end of a message is a common way of showing affection, much like sending a little kiss, and it was something Phoenix often did when texting her mom. Later, still using Phoenix's phone, Ewan sent another message to Allison. "Hey, sorry, I've just woken up. XXX." The message was designed to sound exactly like something Phoenix would send, complete with the casual language and multiple X's that indicated affection. Allison had no reason to doubt that the messages were coming from her daughter. The tone was right, the language was familiar, and there was nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. She was being manipulated by a man she had welcomed into her family, a man she had trusted with her daughter's life and happiness. Meanwhile, Ewan was also spending the weekend driving around East Kilbride in Phoenix's red Vauxhall Corsa, scrolling through her phone and continuing his attempts to purchase cocaine. The weekend stretched on, with Allison believing her daughter was alive and well, while Phoenix's mutilated body remained hidden in the flat. Ewan continued to send reassuring messages, maintaining the fiction that everything was normal while living in the aftermath of unspeakable violence. But by Monday, November 18th, the deception was becoming harder to maintain. Monday morning brought a reality that Ewan could no longer manage. Phoenix was scheduled to work, and her absence would be noticed. Unlike family members who might accept explanations about sleeping in or feeling unwell, Phoenix's employers and colleagues would expect her to show up or call in if she couldn't make her shift. Phoenix was known for her reliability. When she failed to appear for work and couldn't be contacted, her colleagues immediately knew something was wrong. The weight of maintaining his lies, combined with the reality of living in a flat with Phoenix's remains, was becoming unbearable, even for someone as cold and calculating as Ewan had proven himself to be. Throughout the morning, he continued trying to buy drugs, possibly seeking some form of escape from the nightmare he had created. Finally, at midday on November 18th, Ewan made the phone call that would end his charade forever. He dialed 9999 and told the emergency operator, "I had a psychotic break and killed my wife." The words came out in a rush, as if they had been building pressure inside him all weekend. But even in this moment of confession, Ewan was still lying. He told the operator that he and Phoenix had been messing about when the violence occurred, and that he had been taking steroids and cocaine, which he believed might have been spiked with other substances. "It was horrible," he said, as if he were the victim of what had happened rather than the perpetrator. When asked to describe what he had found, Ewan said Phoenix's body was in the hall with a knife beside her. He claimed he had been trying to muster up the courage to call emergency services, suggesting that he had been struggling with guilt rather than simply trying to cover up his crime. But perhaps most revealing was what Ewan said when he was transferred to a senior police officer. "I just want to go to jail," he added. "I'm not violent. I have been out my face. I can't remember what happened. I have been driving about all weekend." These statements were crucial because they showed Ewan's continued attempts to minimize his responsibility and create a narrative that might generate sympathy. He wanted people to believe that he was a non-violent person who had suffered some kind of breakdown rather than someone who had methodically planned and executed a horrific murder. When police arrived at the flat on Glen Lee, they found a scene that would stay with them for the rest of their careers. The police officers who responded to Ewan's 999 call thought they were prepared for what they might find. They had heard his confession, they knew a young woman was dead, and they understood they were walking into a crime scene. But nothing could have prepared them for the reality of what Ewan had done to Phoenix. Phoenix's mutilated and decapitated body was found hidden under a towel in the hallway of the flat she had shared with the man who killed her. The sight was so disturbing, even for experienced officers. When officers placed Ewan under arrest, his demeanor was described as eerily calm. This wasn't the behavior of someone experiencing remorse or horror at what they had done. It was the response of someone who had been living with the reality of his actions for 2 days and had come to terms with the consequences. Ewan's words to the arresting officers revealed the calculated nature of his actions. "I could not stay here with her like that. I tried to dismember her. I moved her from the bath and put her there." These weren't the words of someone who had suffered a psychotic break or lost control. They were the statements of someone who had been actively trying to destroy evidence and cover up his crime. But while Phoenix's life had ended, the investigation into her death was just beginning. As investigators examined the evidence, every claim Ewan had made about November 16th fell apart. Forensic analysis revealed his searches, drug contacts, and calculated texts to Allison. Clear signs he was lucid and in control. A delivery driver testified he seemed completely normal that night, not impaired. His phone's activity tracker confirmed movement around midnight, matching neighbors' reports. The fake messages to Allison were the most chilling, showing how carefully he mimicked Phoenix's voice to deceive her. With no criminal record and a seemingly ordinary life, the brutality of his actions was almost impossible to comprehend. How could someone with no history of violence commit such an extreme act of brutality against someone he claimed to love? The answer lay not in external factors like drugs or alcohol, but in the gradual erosion of respect and control that had been building in their relationship over time. Until now, Phoenix's mom has no idea what happened to her daughter. Until Detective Chief Inspector Susie Can had to deliver the devastating news to Phoenix's family that their beloved daughter was dead, murdered by someone they had trusted completely. Allison Spencer's world collapsed when she realized the weekend text messages she thought were from Phoenix had actually come from her killer. Ewan had written a letter claiming remorse. "I know how loved Phoenix was and how she made her family complete. I can't believe I've taken her from them." But Judge Lord Matthews observed that the letter answers none of the questions which must be plaguing the family. On July 14, 2025, Judge Lord Matthews sentenced Ewan to life imprisonment with a minimum of 23 years. But Phoenix's story doesn't end with her killer's conviction. Her family donated thousands of pounds raised through a fundraiser to women's aid services across Scotland. Women's Aid Glasgow responded, "Her name, Phoenix, now stands for more than loss. It stands for action, for change, for refusing to let her story end in silence. This is what it means to rise from the ashes." Phoenix was just 21 years old when her life was stolen by someone she trusted. Ewan Methan could be eligible for parole when he's just 50. But for Phoenix's family, the sentence will last a lifetime. Yet through their courage and generosity, Phoenix's light continues to shine, protecting other women and ensuring her name will never be forgotten.